Welcome, everyone. I hope everybody is having a good CUGC XL for the Midwest. Welcome to folks coming over from Guy's presentation. Or those that are just joining, welcome. We are going to be listening to Wendy and Craig, who are joining us from abroad, from the UK and from Ireland, and they're going to talk with us about teams in the Citrix environment. That is certainly something that has been getting a lot of attention. So we're going to get started with them here in just a little bit. But prior to doing that, we've got some more trivia, some more prizes. And for those that haven't joined us previously, get you acclimated to the group chat. Group chat should be down there. That's where you can interact with your colleagues, say hello, let us know where you're coming from, just kind of help build that sense of community. So I will put a couple questions out there. Feel free to add your answers in. The first person in will win the prize. And then after that, we will switch it over to Wendy and Craig, and then we'll listen to them and get their amazing knowledge, and then have some Q&A after that. So without further ado, let's get some trivia. What is the name of the first NASA space shuttle that rolled out on September 17th, 1976? Looks like Roger H is the first one I'm seeing with the correct answer. If you're a Star Trek fan, you will enjoy that the name was the Enterprise. So Roger, go ahead and send your email off to jennifer.gibbons@mycugc.org, and she'll hook you up. Next trivia question. Who is the third person in baseball history to hit 700 home runs? Happened on September 17th, 2004. Babe Ruth. I think that's a little before the time. All right, let's see. Who was the first one to get the correct answer? I think it was Brian B, who had the correct answer of Barry Bonds. And yes, it probably will have an asterisk next to it. So Brian, go ahead and send your email off to Jennifer as well. And then last September 17th, piece of trivia, September 17th, 1920. 11 teams met at a car dealership and paid $100 each to join the new American Professional Football League. In what city did they do this? And since we are international, I will say that it is American football. Brad M. with the first correct answer. It was in Canton, Ohio. So Brad, go ahead and send off your email to Jennifer, and she just is posted there in the chat, but jennifer.gibbons@mycugc.org, and y'all will get the hookup with your trivia prizes. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our wonderful presenters, Wendy Gay and Craig Bramley, and go ahead and wow us with your knowledge. Welcome.
Hi there, Ben. Thanks for that intro. Appreciate it. So, welcome everybody. we obviously can't see you guys, but I'm sure you're all there, and I hope you're having a good time. We're going to be talking today about, optimizing Microsoft Teams in a Citrix environment. My name is Craig Bramley. I'm a lead education technologist and also senior systems engineer at Citrix. I've been at Citrix for just coming up to 4 years now. And before that, I was a solutions architect at one of the largest Citrix partners within the UK. And I used to design virtualization structures. Citrix was one of those virtualization technologies that I used to deal with. I'm a CTO as well for 2020. And myself and Wendy, who's my esteemed colleague who's on this presentation as well, and she'll introduce herself in a second. We've also got a side project, which is a blog site called Citrixy.com. So if you guys do get time to have a look at Citrixy.com, it's all things Citrix and Citrix supporting technology-related sort of blogs from myself and Wendy, and also guest sort of blogs as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Craig said, my name is Wendy Gay. I'm a manager for the technologist team in Citrix. I started life in Citrix as a sales engineer, and before that, I suppose that was for 4 years, and before that I worked with some GSIs in the partner world, working on everything from implementations to pre-sales to delivery of Citrix projects. So yeah, I'm also CTA and delighted to be here today.
Cool, thanks, Wendy. So from an agenda perspective, obviously we're going to be talking about Teams optimization within a Citrix environment. We'll go over certain topics, do a quick introduction on Citrix and Teams from a relationship perspective. We'll also talk about why optimize Teams in a Citrix environment, how to install Teams, how to install the Teams optimization as well. We're going to do some demos. Now, these are pre-recorded for obvious reasons. And also, finally, we're going to talk about some troubleshooting tips as well, go over some of the common issues that we face when we're using optimization. Now, if we do get time afterwards, we are pushed for time. We will open up for questions from the audience. If we don't get time, we can always answer those questions later on. Or as we just heard that actually Rene Bigler is doing a roundtable at 15:30, and he's going to actually volunteer to answer some of those questions as well. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat window. If we do get around to them, we'll get them answered one way or another. We'll get them answered. So firstly, let's start with Teams, just to really get an idea of the rapid growth that it's actually experienced in the last 10 months. I presume everybody knows what Teams is, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole and start sort of explaining what Teams is at a low level. But I don't know if you did know this, Microsoft Teams is actually the fastest growing business application in Microsoft's history. So that's pretty incredible. What it does, it just gives the users that platform to chat, meet, share files, and also work in Microsoft 365. However, only 10% of Microsoft's install base were using Teams back in July 2019. So it meant that there was a real big potential for growth, and there still is growth as well. In fact, that growth potential was so significant that even the competitors, people like Slack, they publicly mentioned within their Q3 2019 earnings reports that they expected Teams to see, 50 million user marks in the next 6 months, and then 100 million user marks within that next year. And that's daily users as well, daily active users. So there's quite significant numbers. But if we fast forward now to November 2019, we actually already saw the 20 million mark hit. And so we saw that, that ceiling sort of being hit already. And then since November, what's happened? You guys guessed it, November, December, January, COVID sort of hit, and it's kind of turned everything on its head. Now, the last statistics that I could obtain were actually from April 2020, and they were showing that Microsoft had hit 75 million daily active users, which is pretty incredible, and that was back in April 2020. I can't find any more up-to-date figures on that, but I've heard rumors And I've seen Microsoft hinting that they've actually breached that 200 million active users mark per day, and they're seeing that on a regular basis as well. It's actually quite staggering. So it really shows the actual, the growth that Microsoft Teams is actually going through, and why it's such an important application. So from a Citrix perspective, we've joint collaborated with Microsoft from Skype for Business Days. When they had 800 daily active users. I mean, it sounds terrible now, doesn't it, when you're talking about 200 million? But we actually jointly developed the HDX real-time optimization pack for Skype for Business, or RTOP for short. Teams optimization does differ from RTOP in a lot of ways. In particular, the Workspace app has actually got a built-in media engine, so we don't need to install any sort of other modules or plugins on the VDA or the client itself. It also supports all platforms as well. Windows was obviously the first to be released. That was closely followed by Linux, which has just been released. And then Mac and iOS is literally on the verge of being released now. Just like RTOP as well, we optimize in that audio and the video, but we do more than that these days to improve reliability and usage. So we're optimizing things like screen sharing, single point authentication, and also signaling as well. So over to you there, Wendy. So
thanks, Greg.
Why would we optimize Microsoft
So
Teams?
even just to take a step back and say, great, thanks, Craig. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. So really, I suppose to take a step back and say, do we want to optimize Teams in the first place? And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that first. So when we think of even back to Skype for Business days, if anyone was involved in optimized business, and you're aware of how much of a hog Skype for be when you're using a shared desktop, when you have multiple same machine, and how it can affect other users and really affect scale. Well, Teams, I think, really, Skype for Business is a big hogging performance, and we're going to show that in the data on how much power is, especially when you're out in a situation multiple users on the same VM. You're going to have high view. You're going to have high network usage because you're going to have hairpinning. You're going to have a lot of information going back and forth up to that VDA. And because of CPU network performance, also you're going to have an issue, especially when you're talking cloud. If you're talking about the image and you're talking about having machines, you want to make sure that you get the most you can from those machines. And we're going to show you how you can increase that density. So why Teams instead? On top of that, when we talk about Teams and Citrix, really what was one central level. You've already got your apps and desktops shared within your virtual environment. So you want to make sure you can make use of all your applications in one place. So we want to make sure that we can use Teams, an organized team, have that central control. We also want to make sure we up on the secure signaling and authentication is done through the VDA and not in the media engine. And Craig's going to cover that a lot more when we talk about the architecture of Teams and how that media engine works. Signaling, authentication, and logs are held inside that VDA. Everybody's already using Teams, as Craig had mentioned. You want to make sure you make use of those Office licenses that you have, Teams, if you're licensed. We also want to optimize that experience, again, that user experience. And I think we see that because in our demo, we're going to do a before and after, so you see how much better that optimization is if you use our Teams optimization pack. And again, we want to make sure we enhance server scalability. Every time you use any kind of VM in Azure or public cloud, it's going to cost you money, and we want to make sure that you get as much bang for your buck as possible. So how to install Teams then? And we're really probably going to focus a little bit more on a non-persistent environment as opposed to a persistent environment. So even before we get to the actual installation phase, I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the LTSR, I suppose, question or elephant in the room is, do I go LTSR or do I not go LTSR? And I know Jennifer has shared some links, and if you go to those links, you'll see the list of known limitations down the bottom of that link. They talk about what's available in Teams, when is it coming, and what do you need to do, and what do I need to upgrade to get those features once they become available. So when you choose an LTSR VDA, and when you think about how often Teams is updated, and I come across this a lot with customers where they want to use Teams using a really older version of a VDA, and they're like, yeah, but I have my LTSR, and I'm going, yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to update that to get this feature. So when you talk about Teams optimization pack, I think it's good to have current release in your head or in your mind. Obviously, it's a lot easier to do when you have Citrix Cloud because you're just having to update the VDA. That known limitations page, most of the updates are going to be done in Workspace app. So all you'll have to do is update the version of Workspace app. It's got the WebRTC engine in it, so it's going to make the calls. And hopefully that's a lot less painful for most of our customers. Some of the changes, and you'll see them in the list, they actually call it out and say, actually, this is going to require a VDA update. And then some of those limitations are waiting for a Teams and a Microsoft update to happen. So if you are going to go LTSR, just be aware it's a line in the sand. When you go LTSR, you're only going to get cumulative updates then. New features are not going to come for you unless you update your VDA. As we say, it's much easier to do if it's a Citrix Cloud installation or a current release. You're going to get all the benefits of those features. So what do we need? It's not like Skype for Business, which is good. We've now built in those media engines into both the VDA and the Workspace app. There's no separate like there was with Skype for Business. You have everything built into each one of those products. If you want to use VDA, anything from 1906.2 and above is compatible for using with Teams. Anything that's our Workspace app, 1907 or higher. Excuse me. But what I would recommend is that you make sure you stay, if possible, on the latest Workspace app, given that the feature flags are being turned on there more frequently. And here's just some details on where you can get that information. And of course, it is available with LTSR 12. And from a Teams side, then you also need to make sure you're running on a certain version of Teams. So Teams optimization came out and was released initially with 1.2.0031357, which is now an older version of Teams, really, compared to what we have now. I'm on 1.3 something. So we've surpassed that with the rings from Microsoft and with Teams. So that's what I need to get Teams up and running from a version perspective. Okay, I'm just going to fill that screen out. So when we then talk about minimum requirements and the installation, again, we talk about the version, but then we talk about how we're going to do the installation. And we do have a full step-by-step process on our Citrix IE blog site on how to install Teams with lots of images, etc., if you want to go and check that out. But I think the most important things to be aware of with Teams is that we want to make sure we install it in a way that's correct for the version of Teams that we're using and the environment that we're using it in. So if you're going to install it as an exe, it's going to install in the it's going to install and allow for auto updates. And it's going to install in the app data folder. So what we want is to make sure that that's a persistent desktop, so that if updates happen, they stay, they hold, and they're persistent for users. If you're going to use an Office 365 Pro Plus installer, Teams installed through Pro Plus is installed user. So that means it's not going to be compatible with the VDI machine-wide installation. So you would probably want to exclude it or uninstall it and then reinstall it with a machine-wide installer if you're going to use it in a non-persistent environment. What we do recommend is that we use the MSI to install it when you want to do it as a machine-wide install. And we also want to make sure that we don't do updates automatically. You want to update your golden image. There is a runtime code that automatically updates when new features are turned on from Microsoft that's much smaller. But in general, you don't want Teams to be updating in your non-golden image. So you want to make sure you have the all user flag equals 1. And there is a PowerShell script that you can then use to uninstall Teams if you need to. And I know there's a really good blog. I know James, I think is here, but James Rankin wrote a fantastic blog on FS Logics and Teams and how much bloat happens in the profile when you're using Teams. And we're going to show even again from a memory and a CPU perspective how much of a hog Teams can be. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So when we're installing Teams, so now we have our Teams installed in the way that we want, given the desk that we have. The other thing that we need to do is then install configure a policy. So inside Citrix Studio, you'll see there's a new policy or newish policy for Teams redirection. So we want to make sure that's turned on, that it's applied to our users. And what that will do, that will ensure that a registry key called HDX redirection is flipped to 1. And once that is flipped, that's going to create that redirection to the media engine as well. When I'm testing that, I always log on from my Workspace app to my published desktop as a user. When and check the HKey user key, and you'll see that that's part of our troubleshooting guide that we talk about a little bit later on. So that's one of the steps that you need to do. Once that's done, and you've all of your steps completed, when you want to test it, it's not like we used to have a look in our system tray and we'd see our dicky bow and we'd know that Skype for Business was coloured in and we could say, yeah, that's really working. With Skype, that doesn't happen in the system tray. What you will see is if you go to your name, so mine is W in this case, and click on About Version, you'll see that Teams optimization bar comes up along the top. And when that comes up along the top, you'll now see Optimized for Citrix. If you don't see that, it's not going to optimize. Obviously, it's not working right, and you need to go back and check what's happened and why it's not behaving itself. But you should see Optimized for Citrix when it's going to work properly for you. And I'll hand back over to Craig for the architectural diagram.
Cool. Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, so if we are looking from an architecture perspective and how a call is actually architected within Teams, within the Citrix environment, if we take a look at the diagram on the screen, what we've got is the blue shows the existing Microsoft components. So that's the Microsoft Azure platform and also the Teams client. The gray is actually showing the existing Citrix component. That is the Workspace app and also the VDA. And then in the yellow, this is the interesting part, we've got the new HDX components. So we've got the new embedded media engine in the Workspace app, which we've already mentioned. We've got the HDX Team Services, which are part of the VDA. But here's a really important part, it's the Citrix API. So this technology is actually written into the Teams client itself. So it's really important, like when Wendy was saying in the requirements, you need a specific version of the Teams client. That's why, because after that version, the Citrix API and the Citrix technology was actually built in as part of that. So first of all, the user is going to launch Teams. And then what happens is Teams authenticates to the Office 365 platform. And then tenant policies are actually pushed down to the Teams client, and the relevant turn and signaling channels and signaling channel information is actually relayed to the application itself. Teams then, what it does, it detects that it's actually running inside a VDA, and it makes the appropriate API calls to that Citrix JavaScript API, which is actually embedded in that Teams application. Then Citrix JavaScript HDX web RTC.js, that opens up a secure WebSocket connection to WebSocket service.exe, which is running on the VDA. Now, WebSocket service.exe, it runs as a local system account on session 0. It does things like it performs TLS terminations, user session mappings, and another thing that it actually does, it spawns WebSocket agent.exe, and that actually runs inside the user session. So once WebSocket agent.exe is spawned, it then instantiates a generic virtual channel by calling into the Citrix browser redirection service. The process name for that is ctx svchost.exe. And then Citrix Workspace Apps HDX engine, the process name for that is WFICA 32.exe. What that does, it spawns a new process called HDX Teams.exe. And just out of interest, that's the new WebRTC engine. HDX Teams then sort of joins up with the Teams.executable, and what happens is you've got that two-way virtual channel path, and then you can start processing multimedia requests then between the client and the VDA itself. So user A or peer A then clicks on the call button. Teams.exe then communicates with the team services in Azure, and it establishes that end-to-end signaling path with user B or peer B. So at this stage, basically, Teams is going to ask HDX Teams a series of supported call parameters. It's known as SDP offering. So SDP stands for Session Description Protocol, and it sort of asks for things like, supported codec, supported resolutions, that sort of thing. These are then relayed via that signaling path back up to the team service, and then from the Azure back down to that receiving peer. So once the SDP offer and answer is completed through that signaling channel, just out of interest, this is a single pass negotiation. And the ICE connectivity checks are also completed. So these are NAT firewall traversals using stun bind requests. The secure real-time protocol, or SRTP, media will start to flow directly between HDX Teams.exe and the other peer, or actually through the Office 365 conference servers if it's a meeting. So one of the things that's really important, wherever possible, the HDX media engine within the Citrix Workspace app, so HDX Teams.exe, is going to try to establish a direct network SRTP over UDP in a peer-to-peer call. If the UDP ports are blocked, the media engine basically falls back to TCP 443. So you can see that on the diagram. So if there's no direct path basically between the two peers, or between a peer and the conference servers, HDX Teams.exe is going to use the Microsoft Teams transport layers and the transport relay server in Office 365 to reach those other peers, or the media processor if it's meetings that are hosted. The user's client machines, has to have access to those two Office 365 subnet IPs, which are on the screen as well, and those 4 UDP ports. And then just out of interest as well, the HDX media engine uses and supports ICE, stun, and also turn for candidate discovery. Now, what about if you're an organization like Citrix who are transitioning between Skype for Business and also Teams? The good news is that you can install both Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams side by side as separate solutions, but with overlapping capabilities. And you can also optimize the two as well. So the media engines from both will honor basically what configuration is set within your environment. So it could be an island mode, Skype for Business with Teams collaboration, or Skype for Business with Teams collaboration and meetings. So if you go to the Microsoft site, there's a really good article that discusses these different configuration sets. There's some caveats there, in particular to peripheral access. So only one media engine at a time can access these peripherals. So a good example would be if the real-time optimization pack for Skype, if that media engine during a call, it locks the webcam, basically that is not available to Teams until it is released by RTOP. Okay, and also sometimes Microsoft Teams might fail to actually start an optimized VDI mode. What that does then, it just reverts back to using legacy technologies like webcam redirection and client audio and microphone redirections. So in unoptimized mode, the peripherals are then just simply sort of mapped to the VDI, and they appear to the Teams app as if they were sort of located attached to that virtual desktop. So a brilliant way to check this is within settings, devices within Teams. So the actual web camera name will actually get prefixed with Citrix HDX. So that's the easiest way to see that. Sometimes the speaker and the microphone device names might be slightly different as well, but no, it's not always the case. So if you check in to see if you're in an unoptimized mode, the best way to do is to check the webcam name within the settings and device screen within Microsoft Teams itself. So from a thin client perspective, we've been doing quite a lot of work. From an OS perspective, we've got support for Windows 10 IoT Enterprise. That's 2016 and also 2019. You can see the versions on the screen. We've been working with a lot of vendors, a lot of the major vendors. So a lot of the sort of top thin clients are actually supported already with Teams optimization. So, HP thin clients, Dell, Tenzig as well. We're also in the process of sort of verifying and validating certain other vendors' endpoints, such as Fujitsu and other vendors as well. We're supporting x86 and x64 processors. The minimum processor requirement is 2.2 to 2.4 with Intel, and you need to have 720p HD for peer-to-peer video conference calls as well. You can use a lower spec CPU as long as you've got Intel Turbo Boost and AMD or AMD Turbo Boost capabilities to at least 2.4 gigahertz. And from a RAM and hard drives perspective, you're looking at a minimum of 1 gig of RAM and 600 meg of hard drive space. And like I said, Linux has also been released as well. And we've been doing the same sort of thing. We've sort of been validating thin clients as well with those vendors, the same vendors. So Dell Wise, for example, they can run 9 of the WTOS. Then we've got the Zero and thin clients, 3040 and 5070, all in one, 5470s, and also the mobile thin clients as well. We've also been working with iGel, so they're UD3s, the UD6 and the UD7, and also the Workspace Edition, HP ThinPro as well, Unicorn, and so on and so on and so on. I would advise you guys to go to the Citrix Ready marketplace to get that full list of supported clients. From a software perspective, there's also some minimum requirements. So GStreamer 1 or later, or Cairo 2, OpenSSL 1.1.1D, and we're only supporting x64 Linux distributions as well. From a hardware perspective, 1.8 gigahertz, dual core, again at 720p HD resolutions for peer-to-peer video conferencing. And then again, we can support Intel Turbo Boost speeds as well, at least 2.9 gigahertz. Cool. All right, just stepped back there by accident. Okay, so the first demo is actually unoptimized mode. So this is a pretty basic demo because not much is going to be happening other than the CPU and RAM is going to get hammered. Just bear with me a second because I need to load the video. Okay, so the video clip is running, and what you should be seeing basically is before the call is actually initiated, the CPU is running at about 0.2%. RAM's running about 499, sort of 500 meg. And also
That's
in
my
the Process
kitchen.
Explorer as well. That's your kitchen, yeah.
That's my kitchen, yeah.
We won't see the processor's WebSocket service.exe or WebSocket agent.exe in the Process Explorer either, because obviously optimization is not being installed. But as you can see, look, the video speaks for itself. The video quality is absolutely terrible. It's just completely unusable. Processor is going to be spiking to around about 16%, and the RAM is also increasing as well.
Yeah, can see that.
So you can see that. So Wendy's going to show you the optimized version, how cool it is compared to the unoptimized version.
Let me see, do I see that now? Okay, so hopefully I can move the slide forward. So when we talk about optimized, what we want to show you is, again, that experience where the WebSockets kicks off, it kicks off the WebSockets agent, and we actually see some optimization happening on the client as well as a better performance. So when we look at this video this time, what we want to show you, and hopefully you can see that, is I'm doing the same thing. This is Colm, who's a colleague of mine. So hi, Colm, if you're on this call. And Colm and I were testing these workloads on a WVD image in Azure. And you can see my video is better. You can see my messy kitchen a little bit better. You can see that we're able to chat, collab, screen share. It's much more performant. The two of us are actually looking and working on a presentation that we were planning to deliver for one of our internal calls. You can see that that's working fine. You can also see in the banner at the top, do you remember I talked about that banner? And you can see it says optimized for Citrix. Colm is going to say, yes, he's happy with that. And then he's going to turn on his video as well so we can get to see him. So there he is. So overall, the experience is way better. It's much more performance. We can use chat, collab, video, screen share, and all of that successfully. And you can see here the processes have kicked off as well. We have our WebSockets agent. You can see it's negligible, the CPU that's using. And you can also see that the Teams executable has taken a lot less of the CPU compared to what it was in the unoptimized session. The other thing then that we would like to show you in this video, and we'll show it now in a second, is we've pulled up the process monitor on the client device as well. So you can see that we've got our 2 users logged onto this test machine. So I'm not the only one on here. And hopefully now it's going to pop across in 2 seconds. There we go. It's our WebSockets. And you can see here, so the process monitor on the right-hand side, I think for you, will be the overlay. So this is our overlay in our Teams, HDX Teams.exe on the client device. So you'll see that this is now ramping up with CPU. So that actually is taking a lot of the CPU away from the session and away from that VDA and giving us a much better performance. I suppose from a troubleshooting perspective, I wanted to draw your attention to 2 articles that I think will get you out of most trouble when you're trying to work with Teams optimization. So the first is our HDX optimization troubleshooting guide. Now, this is really, really good. It's updated all the time. It was last updated in September. And it also has, you can see I've highlighted in blue, a live update section. So that's going to tell you everything that was in the limitations section, anything that's brand new out, any new issues that have been uncovered will all be in here, as well as a step-by-step guide as to how you can troubleshoot any of your Teams issues. So if you find your optimization is not kicking in and you're not seeing the optimized bar when you should, I guarantee if you follow that guide, you're going to get out of 99% of your issues. You're going to get resolved. There's another document. It's a troubleshooting, monitoring and support document as well. And hopefully Jennifer has those links in the chat window on the attachment to this. And what they do is it shows you all the details you can get regarding what VDA issues you might be having, what network issues you have. How do I run a netstat to see if WebSockets is working? How do I collect logs? How do I run the Scout? All of the details that you need are in this document to help you fix those issues. So 2 of them, I couldn't recommend them more highly. They're really full of good information and they will help you figure out what's going on. The other one then is since 1912, the HDX monitor will also allow you to have the ability to have a WebRTC channel show up inside HDX monitor. Anything above version 3.5.2 or higher, you can turn this on. Now you do need to turn this registry key on the VDA, enabled equals 1, but once you do that, you'll be able to see that as well. So I think there are two areas I would like to just draw your attention to. Even Director is going to show you that WebSockets exe running underneath the user session as well, so you can monitor them that way as well. Back to you, Craig.
Cheers, Wendy. Okay, and then finally, guys, this is the last slide. So our early access for Workspace App 2009.5 is available now. You can download it from the Citrix download site. But I wanted to actually just draw your attention to some of the Microsoft Teams optimizations that are going to be within 2009.5 Workspace App. So firstly, we can now display the previously used peripheral as a preferred device. Now, previous to that, it used to just show the default ambient audio devices. So that's changed. so that's a good thing. We've also got some performance estimator improvements. So the web RTC media engine in Citrix Workspace app can now accurately sort of determine the maximum encoding resolutions that are possible on the endpoint. The estimations as well are done multiple times throughout the day as well. Previously, they were just done at first launch. We've also got some echo cancellation improvements that sort of describes itself. And then Workspace app for Windows as well. We can now package Teams ringtones, which is pretty cool. Then we've got some pretty exciting improvements in peripheral acquisition for devices with high-end sound cards. So think of things like speech mics, dictation machine, recording machines, high-end sound cards. Basically, previous to this, any acquisition failures, they just basically resulted in acquisition failures under Teams devices, and the word "non" was actually shown previously. So that's a really big improvement. And then we've also got improvements as well in outgoing screen sharing. So the native desktop viewer bitmap is captured directly and shared. Okay, so that's actually released now. So if you guys want to ever play around with that, you can just download that from the Citrix download site. Brilliant. So thanks, guys. I appreciate your time and appreciate you actually listening to us today. I'm not sure if we've got time for questions or not, because I know we've hit 40 minutes.
I think we've run. I've answered some of the questions in the question panel already. With Cisco, you can use, and Cisco Jabber in particular, you can use a VXME redirection from Cisco. And I've also shared details with people around how to optimize Zoom. So there's a whole blog from the Citrix site about how to optimize Zoom as well. Someone asked about the HDX monitor. So hopefully we've answered that as part of the final bit of that presentation. But what we'll do is hopefully we'll be able to stay around for the roundtable and follow up with any other questions that we might be able to help with. So thanks everyone for having us.
Yep, thanks guys. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Craig. So as Craig and Wendy mentioned, there is a roundtable later. So if there are any questions that didn't get answered, or if you think of anything else in the meantime, feel free to drop in onto the roundtables later. I think there was a question real quick too about resource list, and that's in the resource list pane. So you can grab those for your benefit for reviewing later. There's going to be a little bit of time to go visit sponsor booths, take a little bit of a break. Please stop by and visit all of the sponsors and make sure that you're filling out your passport so that you can be in prize, as well as learning about some fantastic solutions prior to the next presentation. So, thanks, everyone.